Hello, I'm Alison Rosie, Registrar at the National Register of Archives for Scotland. The NRES was set up in 1946 and is the body responsible for archives held in private hands in Scotland. The NRES locates and surveys privately held historical papers and gives advice to private owners on their care and management. From this experience, we're aware of some of the issues of concern for community groups collecting archives but who have no background in this area. So this talk will focus on our top 10 tips for community archives. Now, I'm aware that you will all be at different stages in the development of your community archive, but I hope that you'll all get something out of the tips. It's important to remember that you're not alone. There's a lot of advice and support out there, so don't be afraid to ask for help. Speak to other heritage bodies, national and local, and they'll be happy to share their knowledge and experience. There's the NRES itself and the National Records of Scotland, but your local archive will be very keen to engage with you and find out what you're doing. Don't be afraid of speaking to your local archivist. They're there to help, not to tell you off. University archives local to your area or speciality are also a great place to get guidance, but perhaps most useful will be other community groups who might be doing something similar to yourselves and have valuable experiences to share. And for specialist items, such as for film and sound recordings, there are also places to go for more specific advice, such as the Moving Image Archive in Glasgow. You can find local contacts using the National Archives address list of archival repositories. You can search the site by place and narrow down by type of repository, whether you're looking for a local authority archive, particular museum, business or private collection. For connecting with similar community groups to yourselves, I would recommend the Community Archives and Heritage Group. There are a number of Scottish heritage groups already connected to this site, but it covers the whole of the UK, and it's useful for getting links to their websites, seeing what they're up to, what experiences they might be able to share with you, but there's also a lot of good advice and guidance to help you with your own archives available on this site. Now I'd like to highlight a few projects showing how community groups have been working together. And the first one is this Written in the Landscape. And this is an example of a project funded primarily by the Heritage Lottery Fund, a good example of a local authority archive working with a private archive and community groups in the area. In this case, it's Argyll and Bute Local Authority Archives working with the Argyll Archives at Inveraray and sharing their expertise with local community groups. The project involved primarily the cataloguing of private papers and the conservation of maps and plans. But in addition, there were a series of local history workshops organised throughout Argyllshire. Some original documents were digitised for sharing with community partners. There was a training programme in archival skills rolled out to community partners. A number of exhibitions were mounted and drama workshops were delivered to local schools. So it's a good example of what can be achieved by working together. The Hebridean Connections website is an excellent example of community heritage groups in the Western Isles, sharing resources and making their connections more widely available online. Originally with the support of the Heritage Lottery Fund, the Scottish Government's People and Communities Fund, among others. The website draws on the collections of some 16 local groups in the Western Isles and includes photographs, documents, sound recordings, maps, stories and genealogies from the area. And another example of successful community archives project is this Shetland Community Heritage. In this case, the driver behind the project was the local authority, and in particular Shetland Museum and Archives. And this project had a dedicated part-time officer working with local heritage groups. The officer provided support and training to community groups on a range of subjects. And there's also an umbrella group, Shetland Heritage Association, made up of about 36 members. So it's worthwhile having a look at this website. Now, we're often asked about what funding is available. But a benefit of working with others is sharing information about experiences of finding funding and making applications for funding from the Heritage Lottery Fund and other sources. This website, Grants Online, is one of a number of websites with up-to-date information on many of the grants available in the United Kingdom. It covers a wide range of sectors, not just for heritage, but there is a specific section on arts, culture and heritage. Now, this site charges, but there are many others on the internet which are free. And there's also sites like the Communities Heritage website and the National Archives who provide advice on applying for funding and on fundraising. Now, my second tip is to have a clear idea of what you wish to collect and why you are collecting it. And also consider what you do not wish to collect. Now, having a collections policy allows you a certain amount of control. It's something you can point to as to why your particular heritage group might not be the most appropriate place for a particular item. And also ensures that your storage doesn't fill up with material which is not relevant to the purposes of your group. Now, you'll need to think about the size, format and physical condition of archives before accepting new collections. For example, maps and plans can take up quite a lot of space. Photographs require specific storage conditions. Film and video and sound recordings, CDs and DVDs. You need to be able to store them, but also make them available for the future. So you need to think about whether you have the facilities to do that. And you should review your policy regularly and keep it up to date. Now, if you have been offered material which you don't think is suitable for your archive, but you're wondering where the material might go, you might find it useful to look at the Discovery Catalogue on the National Archives website. Now, it has top-level information on collections from all over the United Kingdom. And it's a really useful resource for seeing what else is out there. So have a look. My third tip would be to keep a register of accessions for your archive so that you know what you've got, when you got it, who you got it from, and whether it was a donation or a gift or long-term loan. What should be included in your registers is given on the slide. Each item should have a unique identifying number. Your register should record when it was deposited with you, details about the owner or depositor, and whether it's a loan or a gift. It should give a brief description, whether it's a single item, a bundle, a box or more, and the covering dates of the material in the deposit. It should also state where the material has been placed and the name of the person recording this information, and I would suggest that this is done as soon after you get the material as possible. And you might also add a column for when and to where any material has been deaccessioned. At the moment, your society is flourishing, has an active and enthusiastic membership and is well funded. But have you thought about the future and what would happen should the group cease to exist for any reason? On your screen you can see an item from last February's Press and Journal, where it reported the closure of Caithness Horizons Museum in Thurso. And there was great concern about what would happen to the collections and whether they would be dispersed and where they would go to. Now, fortunately, the situation has been resolved and the museum will continue. But it's worth thinking about the long-term future of your archive. And I would suggest that you draw up a protocol so there's a clear procedure for what would happen to your collections should the group cease and you would have to close. And think about when or why you might deaccession an item and whether it would be offered to another suitable organisation or whether it might be returned to the donor. We're often asked about how to catalogue archives. And my advice would be, don't rush in. It's very tempting to get excited about a collection and dive straight in and get absorbed in the archive material you're looking at. But I would really recommend thinking about a few things first. Now, a basic archival principle is to keep the documents in their original order. Now, that might be easier said than done. Sometimes there won't be an original order, but if you can discern any original order, they should be kept like that and not be divided up according to theme. You should give the documents a unique reference number. You should also consider how you're going to arrange it. The condition of the item, does it need full conservation or does it just need additional support being put in an archival folder, for instance? Are you planning to digitize any items to create a surrogate? What is likely to be the intended usage? Is it going to be used heavily? Would it be best to create digital images and copies? And think about issues like copyright or data protection. Is there sensitive information there which needs to be highlighted? And that might mean that you can't make it accessible to researchers. And think about who's going to catalogue the collection. What knowledge do they have? And what time do they have to do it? How long will it take them to do it? Now, there's lots of cataloguing guidance available, and there are lots of archival standards that professional archivists work to. You'll find information on this on the National Archives website, on the Communities Heritage website, and other places. But it's not necessary for you to take on all the archival standards. It might not work for your collections. And there are lots of cataloguing packages out there, some of which you pay for, others of which are free. But in the beginning, using an Excel spreadsheet or a Word document might be the better option, as long as you get down basic information about the material you're cataloguing, and that might mean just the reference number, the date, the condition of the item, a brief description of what the item is, whether there are any data protection issues, whether there are any surrogates, related material, etc. Keep it simple. Now, it's great when people want to see the material that you've been collecting, but in order to do so, you need to think about the security of the items. And it's a good idea to draw up some simple regulations for researchers on this, detailing what they can and cannot do. Now, before you make things available to researchers, it's best that the items have been catalogued and numbered. And you should check on their condition. Are they suitable for handling? Are there any restrictions, copyright or data protection? Are there problems with handling the material? Is it a very large map? Do you have weights so that you can keep it flat so that the researcher can look at it without overhandling it? Do you have a suitable location, a place in your premises where you can give researchers access and where one of your volunteers is there to assist the researcher, but also see that they have all the weights that they need, but also act as a point of security? And you should keep a record of what has been looked at and when it's been taken out of storage for use by a researcher. Have a limited number of individuals responsible for your archives. That is, avoid having too many people directly involved. This will make it easier to manage your archive, will avoid confusion and enable you to keep track of decisions. On the other hand, avoid having only one person who knows the ins and outs of the archive. And if that is the case, make sure that there are procedures in place, that you have desk notes on what is in the archive, where the accessions register is, allocations, finder, etc. Who's cataloguing what, for instance. And beware of lending out original material, or if you do, keep detailed information of those to whom you have lent documents. Ensure that your collections are adequately stored in a stable environment. The NRES's Archive Preservation Guidelines for Private Owners, which is available on the National Records of Scotland website, has advice on the correct environment and storage for archives. But you must remember that housekeeping is important. Check your archives regularly so that you can pick up whether they are being affected by damp and mould or insects and other pests. And have a plan in place to alert members in case of fire or other incidents. You can consult your local fire brigade for their advice and your local police on security issues. Among your archives, photographs will require special treatment. They need careful handling and storage. And for example, avoid using the type of albums popularly sold in stationers with adhesive pages. These will do a lot of damage to the surface of photographs stored in them. And consider creating surrogates so that material isn't damaged by constant handling. I'm highlighting here the Johnston collection, which is a photographic collection of national importance held by the Wick Society in Caithness. And this is the home page of their website, which is definitely worth a look. The Johnston Photographic Collection covers 125 years of photographs taken by 3 generations of photographers in Wick. There are 50,000 photographs, some on glass plates, and over the years the Wick Society has been scanning them and they are now available on a website. They show Wick at the height of its importance in the herring industry, as well as a lot of studio portraits of individuals from Wick and Caithness as a whole. So if you have a photographic collection, it's worthwhile getting in contact and asking them about their experience of looking after their photographic collection. And finally, Tip 10, keep alert for intellectual property rights and privacy concerns relating to your archives. Now, there will be a separate talk on the SCA website on data protection, but I'll point here to information available on copyright issues, which might affect reproduction of items in your archive. Now, you might own the material, but you may not have ownership of copyright in particular images or documents unless that has been transferred by the copyright owner. This is the very helpful flowchart that's available on the National Archives website, and this guides you through your copyright issue to work out whether an item is still in copyright or not. There is also good guidance on the SCA website, and the handbook that all archivists use is Tim Padfield's Copyright for Archivists and Record Managers. So finally, here are the website addresses of some of the bodies that I have pointing you to during my talk. You'll also find them in the handouts, which will also be on the SCA website. But obviously, if you have any questions, you can get back to the Scottish Council on Archives or to me at the National Register of Archives for Scotland. And here are my details. We'd be happy to hear from you. Thank you.